Welcome everyone. Today I want to talk about covenants. It's been a hotly contested topic, and Blizzard seems to have finalized their decision on which way they're going, at least for the initial launch of Shadowlands. I want to talk about the pros and cons to their decision, as I see them, and really focus on the practical implications that decision will have on you and me as players. When Shadowlands releases, we're going to have to make choices. There are a lot of guides out there, including some that I've done, that have attempted to demystify this decision, so we'll feel prepared and make the right choice. A lot of people have thoroughly tested all the covenants. People have run sims, etc. But the reality is it's going to end up being more of a game time decision. By that I mean, we're not really going to know what covenants are best until the raid opens up. The overpowered covenants right now will probably be nerfed, and so far many of the nerfs on the beta for covenants, talents, legendaries have taken things from overpowered to not even usable. So there's a very real chance that the best covenant leading up to release might end up being the worst. So as players, we need to figure out the best way to handle this. First off, the friction in the community surrounding covenants mostly revolves around tying player power to your covenant choice. So when you pick a covenant, you inherit two abilities, a general ability that all classes associated with that covenant get, and a class-specific ability. The most commonly proposed alternative system is make covenants purely cosmetic and allow players to swap between covenant abilities just like you would talents. So I want to take a look at the arguments for and against this player power decision. Okay, so let's make a pros and cons list. First and foremost, the biggest claimed pro and the main reason Blizzard has used to defend their choice is they want covenants to be a meaningful choice. And I'm going to come back to that phrase, meaningful choice, because I think the key to this whole debacle is in that phrase. This is really the only pro that I've been able to find online, and if I put myself in the pro player power camp, this is also the only one I can think of myself. Now, if we look at the cons list, there's several things going on here. The biggest issue in my mind is that since this choice is on a per character basis, you have to ask yourself what content and specs are least important to me, and what content and specs am I willing to be permanently behind in. So let's say you play a warrior, and I have no idea what covenants are or are not good for warriors, so I'm going to just say some random covenants. Let's say you play Fury and Raid, and I don't know, Kyrian is best for you. And let's say you play Prot in Mythic Plus, and Night Fae is best. You have to pick which spec you're going to excel at, and which spec you're going to be suboptimal at. And no amount of grinding or progression will ever solve this. You'll be behind for the entire expansion. So it's not like Azerite, Essences, or Corruption, because with those systems, you could eventually accumulate what you needed and bring your off-spec or off-content up to the level you want it to be at. So you'll be behind for the entire expansion. Another negative is players who want to be competitive will be unable to choose the covenant they feel most connected with, which kind of seems like the whole point of the system when they announced it at BlizzCon. If I really enjoy the aesthetic, the mount, and the transmog of Night Fae, but I have to pick Venthyr to be competitive in Raid, then I'm simply not going to enjoy the expansion as much. And this gets me back to the key phrase, meaningful choice. And I think this is the main point Blizzard is missing. The analogy I want to use is picking your race in WoW. The player power difference from race to race in WoW is fairly small. So small that most communities recommend players play whichever race they enjoy. For me, I really enjoy playing Undead. I like the look, I like Undercity, I like teasing my friends that they picked awful races. I'm not a role player in this game, but being an Undead is one of the most meaningful RPG choices to me, personally as a player. I'm able to choose my race and have that player agency because there isn't a large amount of player power tied to races. If Pandaren, for example, did 5% more damage, then I'd race change to Pandaren, and that MMORPG fun and identity that I have with being an Undead would be lost. So going back to the meaningful choice, the irony here is that by coupling covenant choices with player power, Blizzard is removing the meaning behind your choice. Again, assuming you want to optimally play your character. So it's accomplishing the exact opposite of its intent. It's like someone tells you, my goal is to not get wet, and then tells you to accomplish this goal, they're going to jump into a swimming pool. That not only doesn't accomplish your goal, but accomplishes the exact opposite of your goal. So this one pro for tying covenants to player power is actually a con, and is actually a pro for making covenant choices cosmetic only. Because let's say you really like Night Fae. but you have to go vent there because of player power reasons. 5 years from now, when someone asks you about Shadowlands, instead of saying how fun it was to hang out in Ardenweald and how much you liked your mount, you're more likely to say, yeah, I think I was part of some vampire covenant, I don't really remember. I spent as little time there as I could, and mostly just blocked it out of my mind. Right? You see my point? How meaningful was the expansion to you? The other thing is, this decision will most likely hurt Activision Blizzard monetarily. So when a new WoW expansion comes out, there's 3 types of people. The hardcore fans who will play WoW no matter how good or bad it is, and I'm one of those because I'm pretty good at blocking out the bad and focusing on the good. You have the players who will never play WoW, but most importantly, you have the players who are on the fence. The players who really want to play WoW, and who played in the past and who love the game, but haven't liked the more recent expansions. And these players are watching the hardcore players, the ones who are playing the game and tracking all the developer updates, etc. And these players who want to come back are looking for a reason to come back. But when they see Blizzard, once again, making decisions that infuriate the player base, they're not going to come back to the game. And it's tragic, because there are a lot of awesome things about Shadowlands. Blizzard dug themselves a massive hole in recent years, and there are so many positive things about Shadowlands. Blizzard legitimately listened to the community on a lot of things and made the game much better. They removed Titan Forging, they changed the way you get legendaries, they removed the infinite grind of Azerite power, they unpruned a lot of spells and talents that the player base likes, the raid is looking really good, you can choose what you get out of your weekly chest, etc, etc. It's like they clawed tooth and nail to get themselves out of that hole, and they're right on the edge of getting out of the hole. All they have to do is reach up one more time to completely repair the damage that was done. And yet, they're choosing not to get out of that hole. They could literally make this covenant change, open up all soulbinds, take the 1-week timer off conduits, make a few tweaks here and there to GCDs, etc., some other things. And everyone currently playing this game would be calling their friends and saying, dude, you need to come back for Shadowlands. It's going to be awesome. But none of us are making that call to our friends, even though we want to make that call. We love this game. But that's not happening. So as players, what does this mean? My plan is to approach Covenants the same way I approached Azerite at the start of BFA. As I mentioned, it's not a perfect one-to-one comparison, since you could eventually get all the Azerite you needed. But you couldn't at the start of the patch, so it's a decent example. When BFA started, everyone hated Azerite, for many different reasons, but one of the biggest reasons was if you got a high item level piece, you could only use it for 1 spec, forcing you to either re-roll that piece for an increasingly crazy amount of gold, or play with a lower item level piece for your off-spec. This made a lot of players mad. However, I never really thought much of it because I had no control over the system, and I chose not to let the system kill my enjoyment of the game, if that makes sense. So at the time, I was main spec Shadow and off-spec Discipline. My best 3 Azerite pieces went to my Shadow set, and whatever I had left over went to my Discipline set. And as I got better pieces, if they were best for Shadow, I swapped out my Shadow Azerite, and my Disc set inherited the hand-me-downs. And my Holy set got my Disc hand-me-downs, and no matter how bad my gear set was, I had a functional gear set for every spec. So I just chose not to let the system bother me, and instead focused on things I could control, like getting better at boss mechanics, etc. Of course, this wasn't too terrible because eventually you got the same item level Azerite for all your specs. This isn't the case for Covenants. So I've been researching the Covenant abilities and soulbinds, and I've learned that there really is no best Covenant for my class as a whole. So my plan is to pick a Covenant that's decent-ish for all my specs and content types, and pretty much just block out the Covenant system from my brain. At the end of the day, I don't want to let Blizzard's poor decisions negatively impact my gaming experience. I want to take that control away from them. So for everyone who's made it this far in the video, I'm impressed. My recommendation is whatever you choose to do, whether it's go all in with your main spec's best Covenants, or pick a Covenant that's a good middle ground for all specs and content types, or if you just pick the Covenant that you enjoy the most, whatever you do, please try to not let it piss you off too much once the game launches. There's a lot of things in life that stress us out and make us mad. Hopefully Blizzard's failure to make their game great isn't one of those things. And there's a lot of great stuff in Shadowlands that will be a ton of fun. Let me know what you guys thought of this video and if you want to see more like it. Me just ranting about my feelings on the game. But seriously, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic and how you plan to make your Covenant choice. Thanks again for watching. I really appreciate you guys. I plan to keep the Shadowlands videos coming, so if you're interested in those, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time.